knows how many will be in the session.
Right. That's great.
All right. Can you see my screen? Oh. No. Okay. Second. Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome. Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome. Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome. And welcome. And welcome. And welcome. All right, let's try this again. Can you guys hear me without an echo this time? All righty. Sorry about that. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to welcome everyone to the 2023 PI conference. So my name is Dr. Kathleen Lontock. I'm the Director of Science and Policy Communications at IDF, and I'm going to be moderating today's session, Navigating the School System. I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Lisa Sabato, who will be leading today's presentation and discussion. I'm also, at the end of Dr. Sabato's presentation, I will be sharing some IDF resources with you all. And after that, there will be time for questions at the end. So if you have questions you would like the presenter to answer, please put them in the Q&A section of the platform. We may not be able to get to all of the questions, and if we can't, please feel free to submit questions to Ask IDF as well, and I'll give you a link for that. We are very happy that today's session is sponsored by Grifols. We're grateful for their ongoing support of our education and learning opportunities. All right, so before we get started, I want to introduce Dr. Sabato. She is a behavior analyst and college professor who specializes in training, consultation, and advocacy specific to the Individualized Education Program, or IEP process, neuroaffirming practices, and bodily autonomy. In addition, Lisa is the parent of a son with a primary immune deficiency. She has been able to channel her professional knowledge into helping her son fully access his education and takes pride in helping other caregivers do the same. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Sabato.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here with everyone. All right, great. Thank you for that warm introduction. So I'm not going to go too much into this here, but I'm so glad to be here today talking about the IEP process and how to really marry those two topics of having someone with an immune deficiency in your life that you are advocating for and understanding that process. So the presentation will review the basics of the IEP. This is something that we could go on in length about. However, today we're going to get into a high-level overview of an IEP, what that is, what a 504 plan is, and then we'll overview social emotional learning and executive functioning, what they are, and why they are relevant to talking about PI. I also want to leave you with some communication strategies that can help create a positive relationship between you and the school team. And this really allows for that collaborative approach. So that way you can make meaningful, substantial, and sustainable changes. So just to cover some basics here, IEP and IDEA. So the field of education, specifically special education, is full of acronyms. These are two that you very likely will come in contact with if you find yourself navigating the IEP process. So the IEP is an individualized education plan, and that's a plan that is specific to your child. It's governed by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, as we call that. And there's a rich history behind how that came to be. We won't have time to get into that today, but it is the standard for legally how we address individuals with disabilities in the education field and how they get what they need to access their education. So when we talk about an IEP, one of the first questions I get is who gets an IEP, who qualifies? And under IDEA, there are 13 different categories that you can qualify under. We're going to talk a little bit more closely about the category where I often see individuals fall when they do qualify for an IEP. and there is not a specific learning disability or something along those lines that is qualifying them. It is specific to their primary immune deficiency. So that would be the category of OHI. And this is something that I would encourage everyone to read a bit about if you want to do a deeper dive into these topics that I'm highlighting today. Somewhere to really turn your attention to would be that OHI category. It's other health impairment. And that really has specific guidelines for who qualifies when there is an acute or chronic condition that is prohibitive to someone accessing their education. The next question, who makes up an IEP team? So that first and foremost is you, your family, your child. In addition, you will have a representative from your school district. That person is referred to as an LEA. They are someone that can make decisions on behalf of the school district. So that's a person in the meeting, really, so you don't get the answers of, we can find out about that. We don't know that today. We're not in a position to answer that. So that's a decision maker for the school district. The whole team will make decisions together, but the LEA is the person that embodies that representative that's able to give those programming answers that you're looking for. In addition, anyone can be on your IEP team that you feel is needed. And so you can bring a support person with you. Some people like to bring an advocate. You will have a teacher there, a general education teacher. And if your child does have a special education teacher, they'll be in attendance as well. You might have a building representative, a principal. Sometimes that person's the LEA, and sometimes they are in addition. If there are any related services, such as vision therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, the list goes on. Those specialists will also be part of that IEP team. And so this can sometimes be, an overwhelming process when you find yourself walking in and that table is full of specialists and school representatives. But I always tell families that, you know your child best. So you are going as the expert on your child. And sometimes, in our unique position as parents, we might be the only one that really is very familiar with that primary immune deficiency. When my son has meetings at his school, I always insist that the nurse is invited to those meetings because that would be the person at the school that I frequently have a lot of contact with. And so we invite the nurse to always be part of that team. That's a little bit unique to our situation. And the IEP team, so when are those meetings held? They are held at least annually, but can be as often as you need. There are some years where my son has had a more difficult time, managing symptoms and kind of getting some things under control medically that have manifested in, some emotional needs. And we've met every few months throughout that school year. So they can be as few as once a year or as often as needed. One of the questions that comes up is the difference between an IEP and a 504. And I have, as you'll see on the next slide, a little bit of a compare contrast of those terms. But a 504, we call it another one of those acronyms, essentially, those abbreviations. It's really Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. So it's a little bit different than the IEP, and we'll take a closer look at that. But these are typically individuals that need accommodations to access their education, but they are not identified with a disability that is prohibitive to learning. So it's generally a lesser support than a IEP. However, it does not mean that it is not adequate. It is a different level of support. And so just like we talked about with the IEP, anyone can call a meeting for a 504. Anyone can call a meeting at any time, but at least annually you will review this 504 plan to ensure that the needs are still being met. And if we look at these, we see, as I mentioned, there are 13 disability categories for an IEP. You need to qualify under one of those for an IEP. There are procedural safeguards in place for the caregiver. That is a lengthy document that sometimes my families gloss over, and I, gently remind them that all of your rights are in that document. So if you are finding yourself with a kiddo that has an individualized education plan, always say yes when those procedural safeguards are offered. Take them home, read them, make notes on them. They are a lengthy document, but they go over all of the things that really protect you in this process. An IEP is going to focus more on educational benefits. How are we accessing our education? What are the barriers? What are the goals? How are we meeting those needs? And then you must be reevaluated every 3 years. So you'll meet as a team every year at minimum. A reevaluation process must take place at least every 3 years, so triannually for an IEP. All the way over to the right on our 504 side, this could be any disability. The law is not specific to the evaluation period here. You typically will see with a 504, that disability category stays, sometimes it will evolve over time. You may have a diagnosis that's in place and goes away. Sometimes that happens with certain, chronic health issues as someone may progress past that diagnosis. And another thing to keep in mind with this, a school can create a plan without parent participation. It's not the ideal, but it can happen. So it's important to note with a 504. And then in this middle category here, looking at both, which facts are true to both, they both come at no cost to the parent. So this is a service that the school district provides. There's no cost to the family. They both should meet the child's needs, even though an IEP is typically a more comprehensive support because there is an actual disability that's affecting the education and the performance compared to accommodations that are needed. They both should meet your child. So your child should receive whichever is a more appropriate fit for them. And they both do require a disability. So these are both given when there is a disability at play. All right. So some general knowledge and tips. So being able to confidently work in the IEP 504 team is an integral part of being successful in the school setting. So clear communication skills, I always recommend writing down those concerns ahead of time, writing down what it is that you want to cover, what your concerns are, keeping a notebook or a running list throughout the school year. So you're not going to call a meeting typically every time, something small happens. But if there are things that are going on that, you really want to communicate with the team with that next meeting that's coming up in 3 months, it can be hard in that setting to keep all of those straight. So I always recommend, a notebook. You can email yourself and keep a folder. You can keep a folder for teacher emails. So that way all of that communication is in one place. And then you're able to clearly articulate your needs, your child's needs when you go to that meeting. And the second skill set is really that knowledge of the IEP and 504. So we're doing a very high level overview today. But again, those procedural safeguards are so important. Reading those and understanding those. There's a lot of great books out as well. Rights Law is one. So that way you're going in as a part of the team and you really know, how the process should go and you're able to clearly advocate. So some of the links between PI and mental health, there are additional stressors and challenges. When you're getting into managing an immune disorder and speaking, kind of now putting my mom hat on and speaking from my own experience, we really, experienced a shift about I call them the tweenage years. And so we went from me doing most of the caretaking, right, as parent to my son wanting to have autonomy over a lot of his treatment, making some decisions, being able to self-advocate, and really getting, pride from doing those things. But along with that came, typical stressors that I really saw exacerbated. by managing, some of the symptoms, some of the side effects of his immune deficiency. And so, that became a barrier that I really didn't see coming. And another thing, we all are very familiar with where we are now in 2023 compared to 2020, but that fear of the unknown, the fear of the infections, I think that kind of globally brought about a lot of stress to our family that we tried to keep in check and manage. But, having a kiddo during a pandemic with an immune disorder was something to really be, aware of, I think, just kind of going forward about what that stress can look like. So lots of different accommodations that we had in place for that, kind of some proactive and some reactive, just armed with the knowledge of what could be. And social emotional learning, I want to switch a little bit. So we talk about social emotional learning. Good questions to ask when I'm talking about my son with PI, how his stress level, his anxiety levels are, higher than, maybe some of his same age peers, that of his sibling. I want to know about my school social emotional learning. I want to know what the curriculum is. I want to know, is this something that is specific to him? This is really a way that school can help address stress and anxiety. Talking all about this wonderful chart here from CASEL.org. This could be a presentation among itself, but a good question to ask of your school team is, who runs this? What are their qualifications? When does this get addressed? Is there a research-backed program, or is the school just adding in, opportunities as they see fit? This was really a good SEL program, and finding out about the groups that were available in my school, and even advocating for, groups to be created when they were pulling counseling groups and so forth with kiddos that were managing chronic health issues. Doesn't have to be, necessarily PI, but having him in with a network of peers that, as he was reaching those tween and teen years and starting to feel different, that he had others that were experiencing similar things. So finding out about this SEL program and what if they need more support. The next topic that I wanted to make you aware of is executive functioning skills. So this is really kind of caught on in the schools about a program that they are trying to introduce. I work with, many individuals kind of across the country. So I hear about this executive functioning in the schools I consult in and nationwide. And this really plays a part, what we're finding out in generalized anxiety disorders. So, kind of making that connection there between some of the stress and anxiety that can happen, some of the mental health as you are, kind of coming up through the ages and managing your own immune deficiency, managing that diagnosis, that heightened anxiety, and the role that things like SEL and executive functioning can play. So this is something, if you're not familiar with, to spend some time, getting familiar with, and really seeking out individuals in your school that understand executive functioning and the role that that can play with generalized anxiety disorders and how that can come into part. So a few other skills that we can talk about here that I advocated to be part of my son's plan were problem solving and analytical skills. That really helped a lot with being able to manage some of that stress that he was feeling. Leadership opportunities. And again, kind of putting on my mom hat for some of these, but I saw a little bit of like a self-esteem it kind of tank a little bit as we got older. And it's, why do I have this diagnosis? And those questions set in. And why do I have to do this? And, why am I needing to kind of manage these side effects and symptoms? And so working with the school to create leadership opportunities for my son, where he was recognized, by peers, just, maybe leading a discussion, or maybe something that he was really strong in academically, he got to go up and demonstrate for the class, really helps kind of counterbalance some of that. Relationship building. So finding those adults in the school that we are able to form a relationship with if we're having a more difficult time, if we just need to debrief a little bit. And then I have a bullet point here for healthy habits. So this is not something that was on my purview clinically. This is something I had to live through as a parent. And so my son's school did a whole unit on health, on different disorders, talked about AIDS and different, things that he's hearing these terms and he's hearing, antibodies and this and that. And it was really stressful, and I wished I would have known more going through that, to ask for that curriculum ahead of time, to really explain to him, well, here's some similarities of what you have with your diagnosis. These are the big differences. These are the things to worry about. And these are the things, to kind of know that they don't pertain to you and your situation. And so as we got into these, I think more middle school years and talks in health class, having that curriculum, or at least a high level overview of that curriculum ahead of time, would have saved us a little bit of, I think, of stress and anxiety. So that may be able to help out. And then some general tips. So, going into the meetings, being calm, having your notes, being collected, but being firm in what you want. Being concise, providing evidence and support. I know that we're going to talk a little bit later in the presentation about the wonderful guide that IDF puts out, and that can be a great resource, bringing that information and literature to the school. I always bring printouts for new school teams when we transition, elementary to middle and so forth, about my son's diagnosis, what that is, being specific with concerns, offering solutions if you have them. You want to look at your history, to kind of shape the future. You also want to stay present. I know that's kind of a trifold there. You want to be able to preview your IEP ahead of time. Always asking for a draft is a great practice. And then, taking notes at the meeting. But if you feel that you're going to be overwhelmed, invite a friend. It doesn't have to be a professional advocate. Maybe invite someone there that can be more impartial and take notes for you. And then practice talking through these concerns with another person prior to the meeting. They might be able to point out some gaps in what you're saying, or they might be able to give other feedback that it is only, can be heard kind of through the lens of someone else listening to that. And then just to kind of wrap up here. So when things get off track, it's okay to ask for a minute in an IEP meeting. It's okay to say, this is a little bit fast. Can we slow down? And some counseling skills here I kind of bring into this from my background of saying, what I'm hearing is, you'll be able to get me the materials to review, but it's going to take 3 days, or, kind of recapping back to them what it is that you're hearing, so everyone's on the same page. So paraphrasing, repeating back, asking for clarity, acknowledging viewpoints, but refocusing to your concerns, seeking clarity when you need to, focusing on that collaboration and common ground. And, it's okay to ask, can I record this meeting? Will someone take meeting minutes? If you feel that you're going to walk out of there and, maybe have one of those moments of, I'm not sure what just happened. So, advocate for your child's needs, but then advocate for your own needs to be an effective part of the team as well. And so just to kind of summarize here, these meetings, they can be intimidating. They can make people feel left out sometimes. You have a whole team of educational experts on one side, and maybe you and just your support person there. But remember, you're prepared. You have your timelines. You've reviewed what a 504 or an IEP is. And most important, you are the expert on your child. Thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Sabato. So I'm going to share with you all where on the website you can find IDF School Guide. So you should be able to see it right now. And I'll pop this URL into the chat as well. So the School Guide, this is actually the 4th edition of the School Guide. And it was released last summer, so it's fairly up to date. And we typically release a new edition every sort of 5 years or so. So you can just straight download the PDF if you just want an electronic copy. If you prefer to have a physical copy, you can actually order it for free on the IVF website, and we will send you a print copy through the mail. I do want to note, though, if you want a large number of print copies, we suggest that you go through the Ask IVF link here at the top to ask for that. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the website and actually share the PDF. There we go. All right, so again, this is what the cover looks like, just so you make sure you've got the fourth edition. And it is pretty lengthy, 60+ pages, and it goes into quite a bit of detail, again, about IEPs and 504 plans. There are sections, chapters here about some of the special considerations for students with PI, particularly around mitigating infectious disease risk. And then also a chapter about educational rights under federal law. And this is a really great sort of summary of the laws that apply in this situation. And it gives you great background so that you can go into a meeting feeling informed about what your rights or your child's rights are. We also have a chapter on individualized healthcare plans and emergency care plans. And I will say that, you know, there's a template for a 504 plan. There's also templates for the healthcare and emergency care plans included. We do not have an IEP template because that is specific to either the school system or the state, depending on where you are. And then we've got chapters on managing school transitions and post-secondary education. Just want to note there that the educational rights for post-secondary education are different from K-12. So definitely, if that's, you know, where you are in your journey, you want to check out chapter 9. And then we've got some just sample letters and forms of things that might be helpful as you're dealing with schools. And so there's a sample letter from a healthcare provider, for example, a letter on how to request a meeting with school personnel, and requesting a planning meeting for developing one of these plans, a sample letter that students can use to, you know, sort of introduce themselves to their teacher. This is my favorite page in the entire guide, though, the meeting and conference planner. And it really, I think, very simply helps you lay out what it is that, you know, you're having a meeting or conference about, and what your concerns are, what the questions are, and the outcomes here at the bottom. All right, so with that, I am going to stop sharing and we will get to the Q&A. All right. So we now have some time available for Q&A. Before we begin, please remember that everyone's treatment and condition are unique, and also that school systems are unique. So the information presented during this session is not medical or legal advice, and it's not intended to be a substitute for medical or legal advice, diagnosis, or treatment. You should always seek out the advice of your physician, or in this case, lawyer, with questions concerning either your legal situation or medical condition. All right, so we've got some great questions that came in, and let me pop over to those. All right, so the first question we have is, for an IEP, if the child has both a learning disability and a chronic condition, do you have to have a separate IEP for each of those, or are they typically done together in one IEP?
Yes, so they would typically be done together in one IEP. So the IEP should encompass all of the different ways that the child could be supported. You just need to qualify under one of the 13 different categories, but it's very common that someone may qualify under multiple categories. And then the team will typically meet, and how it typically happens is, someone will take the lead in like a case manager type role. And usually that is the diagnosis that is the most impactful of the educational setting where they will land. So if that's someone that can really provide strong emotional support, or if that's someone that's more, well-versed in physical disability. And so just one IEP though, that will encompass all of the needs.
All right, thanks for that answer. Another question, what happens if the child is still in K-12 and turns 18?
Yes, so this might be, I'm not sure if this is exactly specific to every state, but the states I'm familiar with. So what happens is a couple things. You can stay in school typically with an IEP up until 21, if that's what the IEP team determines is best. After that, so that post-secondary, that can kick in if you graduate after 12th grade at 18. That can also kick in for some individuals at 21. But you switch from what we say is entitlement to eligibility. So we're entitled to an education while we're in school, whether that be that 12th grade, typical 18 age, or 21 if you stay in school. And then post-secondary, you switch over to eligibility. And so that's when you hear about colleges and things, they might follow an IEP. There will be some accommodations. You'll work with your disability accommodation learning center, typically at your university, if that's the route that you take. But we see often, those with disabilities decide to stay in school past that 18th year. More commonly, if it's a learning disability or a cognitive impairment that is severely impactful, and we still want time to learn, life skills, employment skills. And so that's something to definitely talk about with your team and see what makes sense.
All right, just one more question here. Do you think it's necessary to wear a mask if the patient is actively being treated with immunoglobulin therapy?
So that's probably a question that's going to be best decided between you and your healthcare provider. I will say, just from my own experience, which is again not medical advice. My son wore one as long as he was comfortable. So he wanted to wear it, longer than was required and what some of the other, kiddos were doing. And we were comfortable with whatever decision. So, from I think like a more, like a less medical standpoint, my husband and I had kind of gotten to the point where we felt comfortable either way. So we were in a place to give him that autonomy to make that decision. I think that was really empowering for him. But I do stress that it could have went either way. I was comfortable either way. Our medical doctor was comfortable either decision. And so we knew he couldn't really choose wrong. It was more about what his comfort level was. And so he chose to do that about a week or two, I think, beyond, what was kind of the majority in his school. And just from an emotional, an SEL standpoint, I think that worked well for him because it was his choice when to put it on. It was his choice when to put it off. But there were grownups behind the scene, making sure that he wasn't going to make a choice that was going to negatively impact his health.
All right, so that's all of the questions that I see right now. I'm going to give it just one more second to see if anything else comes in. But I do want to thank you so much, Dr. Sabato. It's been a great honor to have you join us today. I just want to remind everyone that this session is one of 39 unique learning opportunities provided through our 2023 PI conference. And we hope that you continue tuning in today and tomorrow as we explore other critical topics for the PI community. And thank you again to our partner Grifols for supporting this learning opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Oh, wait, there is one more question. Sure. Okay, here we go. Let's see here. After doing everything advised, high school is intolerant of frequent absences and supporting makeup work. Legal gray area and lawsuit may take longer than time left in school, 2 years. Any other ideas or who to talk with?
Yeah, there's a couple different, I'm so sorry to hear that because, the IEP team really should be supportive of what that looks like. And if that is an alternative attendance plan. And so it sounds like you've probably pushed the team a lot to get those things in writing. When I have situations where it doesn't feel like we're being heard, I will typically ask or say that we won't hold the meeting unless, kind of beyond the LEA, someone else is there that really is a big decision maker. So I've asked for a supervisor or a director to attend the meeting to ensure that we are ironing that out. I've stayed longer at meetings to make sure that we all agree upon language in that meeting. And so, we're ironing out information that's going to go into the IEP that really specifies what is the policy going to be for makeup work and for attendance. If that language is in there and they are not honoring it, that becomes a different issue. That's now an issue of compliance. And so that becomes a very different issue than not getting it into the IEP. So I think you need to kind of look there, are they not following it or is it not getting written in a way that's beneficial? If it's in the IEP and it's not being followed, that's an opportunity to, I would assume in most states, I'm not versed in all states, but to file a state complaint if needed, which is a more expedited process than going through a due process situation. So if it's in the IEP and it's not being followed, you do have, rights around looking at what that state complaint would be for your state. And then in addition, I know different areas, it's going to be really specific. Here in PA, we have intermediate units that do sometimes have, I know sometimes they're called area education agencies in different states that sometimes have an expert on school attendance. It might fall under school avoidance, which is a different issue than not being able to attend for medical reasons. But sometimes there's a team member there too that can be brought in that can be really helpful to hear from, an expert on that standpoint, what the process should be.
I will also share just in relationship to this question that we do have sections in the school guide that kind of walk you through the tiered process of concerns. Basically, if you have a plan or don't have a plan, and here are the steps in terms of having your concerns elevated, basically. All right, well, thank you so much again, Dr. Sabato, and that's all that we have for today. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks so much. Take care.